Great to have these following two sessions now. As you can see, they're MSP Enabler for Marine Renewable Energy. Enabler, I love that word. How do we enable something? How do we make sure that we're helping the process, getting key tools in place to make sure that things are happening? As you can see there on the screen, we have 4 panelists, and this is a true example. Now, we had one person online before. This is the true example of hybrid, because in fact, we have 2 panelists actually joining us from abroad, from Ireland, and also Mattia from Italy. So let's first of all welcome Kai Trumpler, Head of Division Spatial Planning at the Federal Maritime and Hydrographic Agency. Kai, welcome. Thanks very much. You can take the seat close to me there. Also with Kai in the room, Christina Simioli, Program Manager, Offshore Energy and Nature at Renewables Grid Initiative. So great to see you two in the room. And then joining us virtually in cyberspace, we are going to have Mattia Cecchinato. I think my Italian is correct there. Senior Advisor, Offshore Wind Europe. Mattia, can you hear us?
I can hear you very well. Good morning, everybody.
Wonderful. Good to see you and good to hear you. And it's great that this technology works. It brings us all closer together. A sense of intimacy, which is great. And also joining us from Ireland, Conor McCabe, a colleague of Tom Woolley. We had on a panel yesterday. Head of Marine Planning Policy, Government of Ireland. Good to see you as well, Conor.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. And good morning to everybody.
And everything works, isn't that great? So a round of applause for the technology, everybody, and also a welcome back to everybody online and in the room. A round of applause. And let's jump straight into our conversation because we have a lot to talk about on this issue of finding the enabler for maritime renewable energy. And we wanted to come to Kai with the first question on this. It's on everybody's lips, isn't it, at the moment, renewable energy, how we tie this in with MSP. And really the question, Kai, is, what do you see as the future of marine renewable energy in the European Union? Of course, that's what we're talking about. What do you think really are the main drivers? And I think that's one of the key words as well. What is driving this? What is going to be the motivating force, the drivers of all of this? Kai?
Yes, good morning to everyone, and good to see you, Conor. It is a good question, and but at this point we have to say the main driving force, at least for Germany, is the political decision and the political will to do this. And we can see a big shift over the last 1 or 2 years from something, oh yeah, I guess we have to do this, to something that we want to do, and where there's a a societal decision to do renewable energy at a scale that we could not see even 5 years ago. So, and I think from this political and societal and in most cases democratic decision to do this follow a lot of consequences that maybe have not all the way percolated through the communities that it affects.
Okay, great coffee term there just after the coffee break, percolation. And so what do we need to keep in mind then? When you say that, what do we need to keep in mind? What's the mind frame, the mindset, if you like, we need to have?
Well, if we really want to put ourselves at at the forefront of this development and really do this and execute these decisions that have been made at a higher level. And here I have to say I'm speaking at an administrator who is in the executive branch, right? And there's a political decision and we execute, right? And so if there's if we really want to do this, then we have to shift our priorities somewhat from what we had before. And then the #1 priority will be, at least then for Germany, and given the constraints we have, offshore wind energy. And not other sectors, that will have to, for lack of a better term, take a back seat, because otherwise these I mean, of course, they will have to be functional and everything, you know, but the priority will have to be the development of offshore wind, because otherwise we will not be able to meet the targets and, you know, comply with the political decisions.
Okay, I'm going to follow your lead, Kai, because you said hello to Connor in Ireland. Let's go to Ireland for Connor's take on this. So this first question, what really are the drivers for you, Connor, Head of Marine Planning Policy for the Government of Ireland, for the future of marine renewable energy?
Thanks, and hello Kai as well. And I always find myself agreeing with Kai, which you'll be glad to hear. I think he summed it up really well there about the political urgency. I suppose I'd like to separate what the drivers are from what the accelerators are, and I think they're two kind of separate things that are dovetailing at the moment. And maybe last year we would have given some different answers here in terms of, you know, development and deployment of renewable energy gives us an opportunity to reduce greenhouse gases and move closer to cleaner energy, and that's in line with policy right across Europe. From our perspective in Ireland, we have an extensive marine resource relative to our land mass. So the opportunities to produce our own clean energy are obvious for us. It's a smart move, and it's the right move, particularly that it's clean energy. It supports the decarbonisation journey. It also delivers significant benefits. So import substitution in terms of fuel, you know, potential fiscal return, local economic development. It's a new industry, and that's always a good thing. But I suppose to echo what Kai has suggested there, there's a demand here for it, I think, from the ground up. I think it's what people want. They want clean energy. They want to transfer over to renewables. We are moving into if we're not already in an electronic age, we are accelerating towards that in terms of the vehicles we use, in terms of retrofitting programs. So we need a lot more electricity, and we want that electricity to be clean. The accelerators are obvious. We need to stop importing fossil fuels, and that energy security has come to the forefront. And that's why I'm kind of shifting that away from the drive. It is a driver in itself, but it's accelerating the drivers, if you like. So, yeah, that's. I'll pause there for now. Thanks.
Faster cars, Connor, and also in the current global context, very important as well. I see behind you there you have a great graphic, Connor, and you have the word journey there. Often in these conferences we say it's not a destination, it's a journey. Do you agree with that, Connor?
Absolutely. So this is our journey map for Marine Spatial Planning in Ireland. I can't quite see behind me, but it starts, I think, on this side. And that's our very first outing and our very first report, and ends with our Marine Spatial Plan. But I think that's, you know, we've used the idea of a river because there's no end point. This again is a new beginning, a new start. Just because we have a Marine Spatial Plan, it's almost a platform to begin again. So you're right, it's the process and not the final point that's important around Marine Spatial Planning. I think that's a recurring theme over the last couple of days, and one I'd agree with.
Okay. Connor, that's great. Thanks very much. Let's go to Christina now. So that same question. Drivers, but also accelerators, as we heard there from Connor. Do you agree with that? What's your take on this? The future, bringing in renewable energy, these concepts, these principles, and especially as it relates to MSP.
So thank you very much. So first of all, I agree with Kai and with Connor, actually. So first of all, it's a political decision, so that a strong political decision, of course, I mean, it's an accelerator already. Second of all, we discuss and we hear a lot about the need to accelerate and what does it mean, I mean, when it comes to renewables. Now, I have to add a concern that this acceleration actually does not come with sacrificing then nature. because we do understand that there is a situation at the moment with the energy crisis, so that we do understand that there is a need for a massive deployment of renewables, for sure. And, but at the same time, there is a growing concern that this will happen by sacrificing that nature. What does this mean? We heard in the introduction that Xavier gave about the repower. There are very positive and important elements actually to remove the bottlenecks, especially when it comes to permitting and licensing. Yesterday it was mentioned in one of the questions, and my colleague from WWF actually said that maybe I could answer today. There are growing concerns because there are concepts that are creating concerns. The overriding public interest. It was already a concept existing, but now, when it comes to this massive deployment, it needs to be explained and it needs to be addressed. Repower introduces the concept that actually is already an existing concept of go-to areas for renewables, for instance. So what does this mean? It means that to enable the faster deployment of renewables, member states will be called to identify go-to areas where a strategic environmental impact will be conducted, and this will not be in Natura 2000 areas, but they will go through a screening procedure. Now, all of this is creating concerns. I am part of a project bringing together wind industry, NGOs, and transmission system operators, and we are addressing this. There is not an answer at the moment, but we know that we need to address, and actually we hope that we will be able to address this also with a larger group of stakeholders, so not just its 3 groups of stakeholders, but actually with governments, authorities, in order to understand further what does this, what will this imply.
Okay, so important things to keep in mind then. Mattia, your take on this, so this initial question, the drivers for you, accelerators as well?
Many thanks for your question. Well, indeed, I guess the previous speakers explained it quite better. The political momentum is everything. We had 2 years ago the Green Deal and the climate law enshrining into legislation our commitment to reach climate neutrality by 2050. And now we have this new geopolitical context and this new urgency of energy security and independence that indeed is pushing us and governments to indeed increase the pace of deployment. I liked very much what we were saying before. The journey is the important more than the arrival, so the how rather than the where. Indeed, today we have 28 gigawatt of offshore wind in Europe. According to our scenarios, we're going to reach 155 already by 2030. This is a combination of the latest announcements and targets announced by member states, but indeed the how. And this is why we're here: Marine Spatial Planning, technological evolution, supply chain, employment. There are many factors that, thankfully, to this political momentum are well embedded in both the European legislation and member states. So we are there and we are fully committed as industry to work with governments and all the other sectors to ensure that this race will be done respecting the environments and the other sectors at sea.
Okay. One of the things we talk about here is the importance of geography, and it's good to have you all from different parts of Europe. Kai, this is perhaps a question for you with regards to the North Sea, but the influence or the importance of geography in all of this in terms of the planning, that's crucial, a crucial aspect to analyze.
Yes, I would think so. I mean, it took me a while to actually realize that all these questions we're discussing on offshore wind energy as a sectoral use and maritime spatial planning in general, we really discuss for the backdrop of our own geography and of our own legal history, right? And of these two factors, I think geography is really the key, because if you look at the German example, you can see we had an early drive for offshore wind energy, and we have little space. And on top of this, we have our main centers of consumption in southern Germany. So we need to have, you know, a $1 or $2 billion grid connection for each wind farm. You know, and that's only the sea part. That needs to be there at the same time as the wind farm, because otherwise, right? I mean, there's it really does not do any good for anyone, you know. And if that doesn't, and you can only do this if you have a reasonable certainty. The grid connection will be there and the wind farm will be built, and you can only do this with like some sort of centralized planning. So there was a really early driver to do a maritime spatial plan and a sectoral plan. And so, but if you look at Denmark, for example, or the Netherlands, I mean, just the fact that the centers of consumption are not that far away from the coast means there's not that crucial need to actually have, you know, a long-term perspective on this. So they're like some sort of shorter decision spans are possible. You know, if you look at the UK, you don't even have a DC grid connection. You have an AC grid connection. Basically, you know, the grid doesn't collapse if, you know, the wind farm is not built and the connection is not there. And then if you look at it, even the pressures, I mean, you can see that Ireland has a wholly different view on maritime spatial planning just because of the natural realities that they're having, you know, because we, in order to reach our targets, we need to build up 25% of our maritime space with wind farms. And I assume, Connor, you know, you don't even need to put up 2.5% of your maritime space with wind farms, and you still would have more than your targets, right? So it is really, really crucial to always think about what is the geography that drives the decisions that are made about the space.
That resonates with you, Connor. Geography, very important.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a very fair point. Like, we still have similar challenges in terms of permits and consenting and grid connection and all that, but we do have a lot of space in terms of our blue area. Obviously, I would say that we have a challenge with our land mass in terms of we're a very small country. And we are very good at wind power on land, but we're almost at saturation point because of our land mass being so small. So we are moving over to the sea in that regard. Yeah, I would agree with Kai wholeheartedly that geography plays a role both on land and sea as to how we're going to do this.
So something unique, and also, you know, the expertise needed to look at the particulars of the geography. I can imagine that as a massive task for Italy. Christina and Mattia.
Well, so first of all, I'm not representing Italy actually today, so I would not do this. But no, in general, so to relate on the different expertise that are needed. So in our journey, so I would call it journey, with this collaboration with different groups of stakeholders, what actually emerged as the first challenge for a diverse group of stakeholders working together was also to, and this has already been mentioned by other speakers yesterday and today, is the need to understand each other, actually. And sometimes it's bringing together different expertise. I mean, the MSP is such a holistic process that when you bring experts and when you bring non-experts together and you try to understand how to address environmental issue, it is the very first step. It is to understand each other, to understand what are the definitions, interpretation of the definitions. So this is why, for instance, with this initiative that we are running, we are going to publish essential concepts. It's a discussion paper on essential concepts for offshore wind, which actually gives reference to the different definition of, we heard, I mean, concepts as an ecosystem-based approach, nature-inclusive design, or others. But this is because at the base of a discussion in a diverse group of stakeholders, first of all, you have to make sure that you are understanding each other and you are referring to the same thing. So this relates actually to the expertise part.
Absolutely. And so Mattia, the question for you for offshore wind would be, you know, about the challenges. What are the challenges that MSP can actually address when we're looking towards the future, you know, for your industry, for the offshore wind industry?
Many thanks for the question. Indeed, the Maritime Spatial Planning is definitely a useful tool. We've seen that Maritime Spatial Planning entails an increase of zoning, basically, when managing the sea space. And zoning is, of course, beneficial for all the fixed activities, offshore wind in premise, but that includes also nature protection, for example. Of course, the zoning entails also a centralization of space allocation from the government's side, that this often entails tendering as well. All this also entails more roles for governments in allocating and pre-developing the areas that then will be progressively tendered out. So this is very good from the wind industry perspective, as this pre-allocation of areas kind of reduces the risk then in the later consenting, permitting, and pre-development process. The MSP also is very important for the wind industry to solve the challenge of conflicts. So sharing space to the wind industry, the offshore wind industry is the latest, let's say, arrived at the sea. It doesn't mean that should have the least priority. We are aware that this massive deployment will create conflict with other sectors, and we believe that Maritime Spatial Planning is the right tool to engage with different stakeholders and put on the table solutions that could accommodate the preference and the needs of different sectors. There is a general MSP, let's say, gives a general increase of coordination, not only between different stakeholders, but also intra-governmental between different departments through the MSP exercise, ministries of energy, environment, defense, transport. They had all to sit together in some countries for the first time, and also this is tremendously helpful from our perspective. Then, of course, Maritime Spatial Planning does not solve all the problems. Is not enough for the offshore wind sector to have areas allocated. We must ensure that there is an appropriate regulatory framework that will allow the industry to establish the supply chain, to expand and to deploy the offshore wind in the most cost-effective way.
Okay, we can say that the European Union's offshore wind energy commitments, we can perhaps use the word ambitious. We talked there yesterday about, you know, the complexity of things. For the North Sea, Kai, how do we actually, you know, what do we do when it comes to this? How can we bring this in? How can we actually, you know, address the commitments that are laid out for the North Sea, for example?
Well, the easy answer is, of course, that we already are over our commitments in the North Sea given the plans of the European Union. So we are already overachieved by 2030 with the commitments we already have. And I mean, I think this is going to be difficult enough, and that is also maybe a question for industry. So for Mattia really is, and he alluded to this. Will these commitments and these plans that we have in place, will industry be able to actually deliver on those? You know, will there be enough wind farms? Will there be enough specialists? Will there be enough supply vessels? Will there be construction vessels? All of these, you know, all these secondary things. Will there be enough cables being built? Is that, you know, and that is something that is, you know, where you finally leave, you know, what maritime spatial planners can do on this.
Okay, and perhaps we can just get the Irish perspective on that same question. So how do we achieve those ambitions, Conor, for Ireland? Big question.
Yeah, I might just... Thanks. I might just pick up on a couple of points there. I'd like to just agree with something Matteo said in regard to marine governance. I think that's key here. And certainly... from our perspective, that's been a major plus in terms of, I think, putting us on the right road to meeting our objectives. So by creating the Marine Spatial Plan in Ireland, it allowed us to bring together all the partners and stakeholders across the marine area from across government, who had been operating quite in a linear fashion, so just doing their own thing and not really having their heads up, looking across policy areas that weren't related to their own. So the process again brought that a new way of thinking, and I think that's going to exist into the long-term future. It must, in order for us to have a long-term view. There's also an acceptance that, I think that we're going to have a short-term and a long-term way of doing things, that we have to kind of transition through a hybrid approach in terms of being in a developer-led system, as we move towards, as fast as we can, towards a fully plan-led system, because creating these zones, and that's a word I don't like myself, we tend to avoid it here, we call them area plans, but to transition towards those area plans and area management plans is going to take some time. We can't do it overnight. And, I suppose going back to a point made by Christina then around the environment and sacrificing the environment, I think that's an extreme view in the sense that where we want to land is what's an acceptable sacrifice, if you like. It's not a complete sacrifice of the environment, but I think there will be some conflict, and we have to find that point that isn't too far along that point, but an acceptance that there will be some disturbance, and what is an acceptable amount of disturbance. But I don't think it's either or approach will help here. Likewise with ocean energy, we have to find a place to put ocean energy. It can't go everywhere, and that there has to be an acceptance on that side too. So that is the essence, in my opinion, about marine spatial planning. It's finding that sweet point between two or more different activities or conservation or environmental concerns that allows us to kind of meet our ambitions, but in a proper considered manner.
Okay, we'll open it up to Slido in just a moment, so questions from the audience online and in the room here. So start putting those questions in for our panel. I just wanted to come to Christina on that point from Connor, because this links into, we talk about conflicts, we can also just talk about simply about the interaction between the offshore wind sector, other sea users, and we talked about multi-use when it comes to the MSP process. What's your view on that? What's the approach? How do we deal with that? Whether it's conflicts or just simply the interaction.
So, with regards to the interactions, as our objective of this initiative of bringing together this different group of stakeholders, as we have biodiversity as a driver, so it's offshore and biodiversity. Of course, we have been looking into the multi-use options. At the moment, there are not many practices and examples. So first of all, so it's not easy at the moment actually to have a position about this. There are interesting pilot projects. So there are Horizon 2020 projects like United that actually are proving what activities are compatible one with another. So because this is another point, so not all activities can be compatible. And of course, there is also an environmental and geographical component that actually makes these practices not replicable then, so that you need actually to develop these pilot projects in order to understand what works where. But for sure, this is a very important way to make an optimal use of space. Space is scarcity. MSP process, actually is used for that. And eventually also to, I would say, decrease, and I would be careful, conflicts, because it's not the solution. So it can be, but it can be one of the options actually to resolve conflicts. But let me just tell you that, so this particular kind of activities, for instance, is one of the options, but actually as the Offshore Coalition for Energy and Nature, we have also a wider perspective on what can be done. Because it's not only, because this is also to protect, it is to find the coexistence, but also to protect the environment, so to find actually measures that can also have a benefit for nature. But lately we have been discussing about something that is wider, that actually was mentioned in the session before. It's about restoration. And this is very important because we believe that we need a mind shift so that it's not just protection, but actually what we need to do is restoration. This is why we have published a statement where actually this three group of stakeholders, so important private sectors, are actually willing to support a strong restoration law, meaning that we do need binding, quantifiable, and clear restoration targets, and we do need also clear rules for the implementation and enforcement. How this is going to be related to, the marine environment is particularly because if we think about, for instance, the 15% binding restoration target, where a 10% could be passive restoration, so no-take zones, and could actually enforce the strictly protected 10% areas that biodiversity strategy mentioned, then there will be a 5% of active restoration that could be, all these activities that requires a human intervention actually to restore nature, so to restore the ecosystem. So as to relate, the view is a little bit wider, and we also believe that there is a need to combine the energy planning, so that MSP, is for sure a very good opportunity, with the restoration planning, because member states will need to do restoration, also as a planning, so that combining the two is a great opportunity actually to restore, but also to avoid risk that may then come from not addressing them together.
Lots to talk about, lots to unpack there, conversations to be had, dialogue to be had, and not just today. Hopefully this is like a catalyst for discussion on lots of these points. I wanted to open it up to the audience, to the participants online, also in the room. So let's shift to Slido. I don't know if anybody's already put questions into Slido. Let's get that up. It'll be interesting to see the kinds of questions. Oh, we have the same question coming back on the energy targets. And this is something obviously very, very close to this topic. So 14 likes here. Interesting with a different panel to get the response on this. So can MSP keep up with marine energy targets that are being driven by the energy crisis? So obviously we had a taster of that question in the previous session. Connor, maybe we can start with you on this point. I don't know if that resonates with you, this question.
Yeah, it does. It does. Can I just step back a little bit to agree with something the previous speaker, Christina, said? I couldn't agree more. Actually, we've defined conservation as an activity under our legislation recently, because it's not a passive piece of work, and it should be managed. I think the points you're making there are really something I would agree with, and I don't see why we shouldn't be bringing them in as an activity, as we would with any other activity. Anyway, just a small point. It's very hard to keep up with the targets at the moment, and they seem to be changing every couple of months. And look, that's a positive thing in the sense that it's a step in the right direction. We want to drive towards clean energy. Is MSP agile enough to keep up with it? I think so, because I think, like most member states, certainly from an Irish perspective, we have an adopted national plan which sets out the national targets, but we'll be progressing now more localised marine spatial plans, which will be more agile because they're smaller by nature, but it'll allow us to kind of take on the new targets and kind of work towards those. I suppose just to add in a couple of other points around the agility there, and there will be an ongoing importance around managing stakeholders in terms of those targets, establishing groups between offshore renewable energy and seafood, groups like that, to make sure that targets are known, expectations are managed. And I think that's going to be key in keeping up with those sort of targets. I suppose while I have the microphone, I might just make a couple of other points. I think there has been a number of things coming out of the Commission recently around accelerating and around looking at our planning systems and permit systems. And look, that all makes sense. It's all good. But I think it was referenced earlier. I think the IROPI is going to be an issue that needs to be addressed. I think a lot of the consenting will end up in IROPI, and I think the current practice of IROPI can take years. So I think that's something that maybe needs to be addressed in order to keep up with those targets too.
Okay, hopefully somebody furiously took down some notes on that. Conversation to be had, Connor, no doubt as part of this wider conversation, so that's great. Thoughts from the panel, from the rest of the panel on that issue about the energy targets? Disappeared from the screen, but Kai?
Yes, this is actually a big topic in Germany right now, because if you have seen the German plan, if we use up all the priority and exclusionary areas for and reservation areas too for offshore wind energy, we'll be at 57, 58 gigawatts installed capacity, which leaves a gap of at least 12 gigawatts. And on top of this comes the need for repowering, during downtime and stuff. So we're significantly short of our targets right now, and we actually need to find more space for offshore wind energy. So this is it, and I do hope we will be able to keep up with this, because we have time till 2045.
Okay, because you talk about accelerators, don't we? We have to make sure that we take the time to actually look at the issues and not just everything accelerated. 14 likes for this question. Marine renewable energies are not only based on wind. Which technologies of MRE have been so far considered in your respective countries? How have you included them in the MSP process, as some of them use the same location? Reading these questions live is always a challenge. Who would like to respond to that? It follows on, doesn't it, Kai, from what you were saying?
Yeah, just really briefly, for the North Sea in Germany, there is really no other renewable energy that delivers the same amount of energy and installed capacity and terawatt hours per year than offshore wind. It's a mature technology, and as we are at 8 megawatt hours installed capacity, 8 megawatts installed capacity per square kilometer, there's nothing that even comes close to this. The only other thing that could conceivably work is offshore solar, which we don't have any experience with, and we do not expect anything anywhere near these energy gains, and all the other technologies, wave, currents, ocean thermal energy conversion, just do not work in our part of the North Sea.
So geography comes into it again. I don't know if anybody else on the panel, Connor, anybody wanted to? Yeah, Connor?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. We haven't set targets around other marine renewables. We obviously would like to explore wave, tidal, green hydrogen, all of those areas, but I think it's actually counterproductive in a way to set targets ahead of technology coming on stream, because expectations take off straight away. Like at the moment, we're trying to manage expectations around floating wind, which is an emerging technology at the moment, but because it's out there and because it's been sold, I suppose, by the industry as the next big thing before the technology has actually caught up with those kind of claims, everybody wants floating wind now, and they want it tomorrow. So I think it can be counterproductive setting targets that aren't realistic right now. That's my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, and some people say, we actually need that yesterday. The deadline was yesterday, so yeah, absolutely, a lot of pressure on there. I don't know if anybody else on the panel, Christina?
Can I say something? It was about actually the very first question. And so, I mean, we heard yesterday, for instance, a very good experience. It was from Sweden, actually. And so that Sweden already, for instance, in 2 years is going to revise, according to the offshore developments, to revise the MSP, so that having, shorter term revisions, it's also a very good way. It's an adjustment, as we say, so that also the world is changing and we don't know what will happen. What is very important, and actually we really support, is a long-term, a long time horizon, because it's also important not just to look at the 2030, but looking beyond, because it will be an accumulation of impacts, and the use, will increase, so that having also longer-term perspective.
Okay, Christina, thank you very much. Let's go to this next question. 11 likes on this one. We talk a lot about upskilling at the moment. It's also linked to new technologies, isn't it? Understanding what the new technology does, how do we fit that into our plans. The skills, or the upgrade of skills, pivotal for public authorities, staff to succeed in the MSP process. Interesting question. I don't think we've talked about training. We've talked about education up until now, but training, just making sure we have that expertise. Does that resonate with anybody on the panel? I don't know, Mattia? We're talking there about public authorities staff, but I suppose it's across the board, isn't it? It's across the board, and Kai can respond as well. Mattia, maybe to start with Mattia, just for your perspective, because it's also, you know, the industry making sure that the authorities understand and that they're trained up on the technologies and actually what you're involved in.
Yes, many thanks indeed. Well, skillings and like hiring more staff applies to both the industry and the public authorities with more volumes. Of course, from our side, there are more components to produce, install, and maintain. The wind sector is steadily increasing the number of people employed. Today, we have around 40,000 people employed for offshore wind. According to our views, we will go over 100,000, 200,000 well before 2050. So, of course, there is a big effort from the companies, universities to skill and train personnel that can build and operate offshore wind farms, but we also notice a lot of focus from member states and from governments in increasing, because more projects to build means more projects to consent, to tender, to evaluate, and of course this requires a lot of personnel, experienced personnel, in order to allow that we have the space at the frequency of tenders that we need to reach these targets, and of course the permitting done in the most in the smoothest way. So that, for example, the establishment of a one-stop shop that we are really keen in having, and of course requires the hiring new personnel in government departments.
Okay, and Kai, upgrading of skills in Germany?
Yes, the more I look at the question, the more I actually think it's a backhanded compliment. It's like, what sort of skills do you need to finally succeed in, after years of trying? I would say that, I mean, it's always helpful in public administration to have a strong background in you know, the sciences that apply to this, like law, geography, biology, I mean, to an extent engineering. But also enumerating all this says that really the key to succeed in this process, in my point of view, is curiosity and the willingness and ability to work interdisciplinary in a large team. And you know, the willingness to question yourself in the approach that you have at all the times. I think that is more important than a particular line of education that you have. So, yeah.
Okay, and we can say that when we go into those meetings where decisions are about to be made, sometimes we say we need a training session beforehand, actually, just to get our heads across actually what we're talking about before the decisions are taken. Good points to be made. The question there, the next question there with the most votes, are public authorities taking into consideration both social and environmental impacts when selecting sites for offshore renewables? Connor, just a heads up that I'll come to you on this probably first. Is ongoing engagement with stakeholders happening at the local level? Perhaps the Irish example for this, you can answer this, Connor, hopefully.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about interaction between developers and local communities, there's no doubt that that's based a lot around infrastructure support, so ports, harbours, and who and what lives around those areas, and then fishers and aquaculture are obviously the other main kind of groups. To my knowledge, the social aspects of it haven't emerged as being at the forefront of thinking in terms of the engagement, and I think it's something we kind of grapple with. Certainly, I can only speak from an Irish perspective. During the process that led to a Marine Spatial Plan, that like what does that look like? What does social and recreational well-being kind of look like? How do you define it, and how do you monitor? I suppose at the other end. But I think over the last 2 years, certainly in our country, it's defined itself in many ways, in that people's interaction with their sea area along the coast has increased exponentially. A lot of people have taken to sea swimming, and that means that planning has to take into account facilities for those people, and it means that any infrastructure that's being built within those areas will have to take into account those kind of spots. And I think this is new and emerging. It's something we're trying to get ahead of by working with local authorities to make sure that they put these kind of issues at the forefront. But I would classify this as an emerging issue rather than one that we've solved right now.
Okay, maybe I can just squeeze a question in here as well, which is a little bit linked to what we were talking about just in the previous question. So we were talking about training and upskilling. Are there other ways we can use the experience and the insights? We talked about data in the session yesterday, the sharing of expertise. Are there other areas we can work on, Kai? We can draw on to make sure that this is going to be a success.
I think it's always good to see and to look for other ways to engage people who may be able to contribute to the process. While always keeping in mind that if we talk about specific stakeholders, they may have specific agendas. But what we always find very helpful is to involve actually science and scientific endeavors in the way we can, and this happens through projects which we always take part in, for example, with Marlena. And this happens in our process by, we, for example, had a scientific advisory council for our MSP process. And this goes back to what I said before, you have to keep an open mind and always question your approach to see can you get more information from somewhere else. And I always thought it would be really nice to have exchange programs between authorities, but it's always hard to you'd have to work for 6 months or so at a place to actually get a transfer. And while I would love to work for 6 months in Brest or Gothenburg, I don't know if my bosses would like that.
Erasmus for professionals,
yes.
Why not? A European concept. We can call it something else, Erasmus with a P at the front, professional Erasmus, I don't know. Good idea, somebody's taking notes on that hopefully. Good question. I wanted to just go to, we have a question at the top about the new sectors and the challenges which we had in the last session. I just wanted to maybe just start with the other question there. Maybe this could be for Christina, the second question there. As old offshore wind sites come to the end of their lives, what role should MSP play in steering, repowering, replacement, given this is less a question of space and more about choices related to managing the impact, commercial competition, technology, etc.? Lots in there, Christina.
Yes, there is lots on there. So, first of all, the repowering is absolutely important. So that in terms of space, there is a possibility to increase capacity, and this is a key question. In terms of end of life of offshore, we are actually looking into also the circularity, so that it's very important also that we make sure that the components actually can be reused and recycled. There are many research studies going on at the moment in order to understand how we can use the components in order to, to actually enable a circularity. For instance, there are examples of using part of the turbines for bridges, and so that this is, it's also about the skills that we were talking about earlier, is that there is more than just, in the MSP there are further opportunities that can be created actually also in a creative way of thinking, and so that also, for instance, the rethinking about the projects and how the wind components can be used for others. This also requires some creativity and additional skills.
Okay, great. And maybe Mattia, you wanted to add something to this? This would be right in your area.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there is a lot of work that has been done from the wind industry perspective in terms of circularity. Christina indeed was mentioning what to do with blades, which I'd say today is the most challenging to actually reuse, recycle or recover, following the recycling pyramid indeed. You might be aware that actually the wind industry, our members, signed a landfill ban for blades by 2025. This is a sign of the effort, and a lot of research is going on that direction. Now, we also have been calculating, we foresee less than 1 gigawatt from here to 2030 to be the commission, and thus we are starting engaging not only within the industry research institutes and recycling facility, but also with environmental parties such as the NGOs. This is one of the activities, for instance, that were planned in the short future within Ocean, the Offshore Coalition for Energy and Nature. What to do? Not only with the turbines, but most importantly with the foundation, because we hear a lot about the benefits of the benthic animals and species grabbing the wind farm foundations. So do we want to remove them? Do we want to leave them there? Of course, this must be spelled in the project proposals, in the environmental assessment, but the best, let's say, model is still under discussion. So our focus is there too.
Okay, listen, we have, Kai, yeah, just something to add.
Just really to put this out there, from the current German law, the current German MSP states very clearly, whatever you put into the sea, you have to take out of the sea completely. You know, so
you are what you eat, is another way to say it, maybe in English. I don't know how we say that in French, you are what you eat, or what goes into the sea inevitably comes out of the sea. We'll hear the translation and the headphones. Don't forget, actually, the next session, there is I think there's 1 or 2 French speakers, so if you don't have the headphones, the headset, do grab that, because we do have a couple of people in French for the next session. I wanted to just finish this session, though. It's interesting. Obviously, the conversation could go on for hours on this subject. What I wanted was just to get an idea of the key takeaways from all of the participants when it comes to this whole question of, what is the enabler? When it comes to MSP, renewables. Christina, just a phrase or two, just what's your key takeaway?
So in order to answer to one of the questions before, that of course social and environmental impacts are taken into account by public authorities. It's just a matter of actually addressing them in a larger group with diverse interests, and not just, with those that can participate, but also the local community, so that we have different layers. So it's... Oops.
Oh,
so the interpreters will have some problem translating this. Sorry for this.
This is like concluding remarks, and we're launching into a whole new...
just confirming that there is a commitment to address those. We just need to do it in larger groups of stakeholders. That's it.
So lots of voices, hearing all the voices. Christina, great. Kai, your buzzword or two or one phrase?
We need to be planning for a better tomorrow today.
Great. So this is a conference of slogans. I think there's going to be a slogans list at the end. I've already jotted down or memorized a couple. Great. And just the thought behind that, just one phrase on the thought behind that?
No, it's actually, let me go a little bit in a different direction. I think we, and this is, I think, is sometimes forgotten in the discussion here, that we and the MSP authorities are really we are on the executing level. If we are under the political direction of our political masters, and if they say do this, then we do this. So so if they decide we need a lot of offshore wind energy, then we try our best to make this happen within the constraints of the system, and of course as environmentally friendly as possible. I don't think nobody of us wakes up in the mornings and says like, oh, how can we screw up the marine environment, right? So we really need to do our best here, and it is going to be very challenging.
Okay, and challenging, the key word there at the end of that. Connor, your takeaway from this session, looking forward?
Yeah, I suppose it's a takeaway from the conference and yesterday's meeting, and in general, I think marine spatial planning and people working in it are really ambitious, and I think that's it's great to see. I'm always reminded of it every time there's interaction with colleagues across Europe and across Ireland, that when we bring stakeholders together, our peers together, there's always that sense of ambition in the room. People want to make a difference, they want to do the right thing. I think the drive towards clean energy isn't just, I would disagree with Kaya to an extent. I understand that we have to do what our political masters say, but I think a lot of people are ambitious because of the programme itself, the decarbonisation programme, and ambitious to restore nature and all of those things. So I think that's the buzzword for me today is a buzzword I get every time I meet people like this, and that's ambition.
Okay, and I said yesterday I wouldn't like to be in your shoes. It's such a complex, ambitious job, or I should say I wouldn't want to be in your gumboots on the boats. Yeah, such a tough job, but as you say, very ambitious, and it's great to have people who feel that sense of ambition. Mattia, your final phrase, your takeaway from this session.
Thanks. My final words will be working together. We say that between different ministries in the same countries, between different stakeholders sharing the sea space, but something very important that we haven't mentioned actually is international collaboration. And that's it from my side. Thanks.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about corporations and the sessions yesterday as well. Great, thank you so much. A round of applause to our panel, both online and in person. And as you know, there's no time for a coffee break. We're going straight into the final session. But what I wanted to do, we're talking about wind energy and windmills. What I wanted to do, everybody just to stand up just for a moment, just to have a shake and a stretch and to do a windmill. We're talking about wind energy. So we need to turn ourselves into windmills with the hands up. I'll try and do it. So if you all follow my lead. It's a windmill. This is like instead of a coffee. Wind energy, it's renewable. I can feel the heat already. I can feel the heat. So that's always a good sign. So yeah, just have a bit of a stretch, have a wiggle. If you don't have a headphone for the French part of the next session, do grab that. Hopefully you've got that. But we will launch straight away into the next session. I did want to give you a little bit of a stretch. And our final session, which is very important, and it kind of brings all of this together, doesn't it, actually? It's all linked when we talk about renewables. I see some people are maybe possibly getting some headphones. Maybe we'll just, as we bring our panel forward, we'll just let people just have a bit of a stretch and a wiggle, and then we'll settle down.